So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the sympathetic string preset string 1 it's called. The basic idea is this is a physical model of a set of strings, a set of sympathetic strings. There's 6 of them. So with the default settings, so none of the buttons pressed, the first knob says frequency 1, and that's going to control basically your fundamental frequency of the strings. And the other, it'll be one of those strings, and then the other 5 strings will be tuned to the harmonics of that original string. So I'll put in a little bit of an impulse to trigger them. Let's play a snare drum into the sympathetic strings. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, so you can hear it's kind of like a major chord because it's the overtone series. And then you can get, with this second knob here, detune. You can kind of push those strings a little bit out of tune with each other. If you do it really subtle, it's kind of nice. It gives them an acoustic kind of quality to them so that they feel a little more natural. If you do a little more, then it gets a little ugly, but it can be interesting. If you have it on 0, it can kind of sound a little too perfect maybe, but it's neat. It's a good sound. So over here you have decay. If I trigger with a shorter decay, they die away faster. If I leave decay up to 100, they basically, or up to 1, they self-resonate, really. Something around like something around there would be pretty normal. There's also a control for damping. If the damping's all the way up, then there's no damping applied. This is basically a low-pass filter in the feedback loop, so it's damping down the sound as it vibrates around in the model. Kind of emulates like having a bit of a, like the fleshy part of your hand up against the bridge, kind of palm muting the strings a little bit. If you put the damping down pretty low, it really darkens them, but it also kind of starts to flatten the pitch. Yeah, you can kind of hear it go down there. Here, let me... So if you want really accurate tuning, you have to not really have the damping too far down, like below halfway, or even probably need it above 3000 or so to make sure you're not really messing up the tuning, depending on how high the notes are that you're playing. Over here, let's see, what's this? Yeah, I talked about decay. Over here is pick position. So that's kind of where you're plucking on the string, where it's injecting the input signal onto the string model. So if I hit that snare again and move this around, I'll turn up my damping a little so you can hear the effect a little more. Kind of subtle, but it changes a little bit which harmonics are activated on the strings. It's like moving your pick position around on the string. Things get a little weird with the second page of knobs here. If you push up and check out what else is on here, we have preparation position and preparation force. This algorithm's kind of borrowed from Polly Dahlstedt, who developed it. He calls it the living string. And it's sort of a simple string model waveguide, except that it also has this additional thing which is called the preparation, where it's kind of like having a finger that you can push on the string, so you can get harmonics. And then it has this thing called the preparation index, or preparation force, I called it on this display, which is basically like, it's kind of like you can think of it as how hard this object is pushing on the string, but it's more like how soft is the object that's pushing on the string, and is it pushing hard or not. So all the way down, it's nothing. It's like there's nothing touching the string. As you move this knob up a little bit, it'll be a little bit like lightly touching the string with your finger. And then middle is kind of like you have a hand damping the string completely. As you go up, it's like the hand got really hard and became a slide. And then as you go all the way to the top, then it's like you just have a steel bar, like a slide moving around on the string. So let's hear what that kind of sounds like. First, I'll do a little bit of a here, let me actually loop. I'm going to switch the audio file to be instead a voice, so it's a little more continuous.
Section 4 of Celebrated Crimes, Volume 6, Part 2. The Man in the Iron Mask by Alexander Dumas. Translated by George Bernard Ives.
All right. So then that's with preparation force at 0. I'm going to start turning up preparation force a little bit, and then I'm going to move preparation position around. So it's like changing where you're touching on the string, and then pick position and preparation position are independent. So you can pick in a different place and then move your finger or the slide independently of it. But each of them kind of are dedicated to their own half of the string. So you can only go down from the bridge to the halfway point with your pick, and from the nut up to the halfway point with your preparation. So.
Zetier, Brussels, 1649, says that she was infatuated about him and allowed him to visit her in her room. She even permitted him to take off and keep one of her gloves, and his vanity leading him to show his spoil, the king heard of it and was vastly offended. An anecdote, the truth of which no one has ever denied, relates that one day Buckingham spoke to the queen with such passion in the presence of her lady-in-waiting, the Marquise de Senecey, that the latter exclaimed, "Be silent, sir! You cannot speak thus to the Queen of France." According to this version, the Man in the Iron Mask must have been born at latest in 1637. But the mention of any such date would destroy the possibility of Buckingham's
So once you get to
paternity.
0, it's really
He was
damping the string
assassinated
heavily.
at Portsmouth on September 2nd,
Now if you get above 0,
1628.
or I mean
After the
0.5,
taking of
I
the
mean.
Bastille, the masked prisoner became the fashionable topic of discussion, and one heard nothing else. On the 13th of August, 1789, it was announced in an article in a journal called
So that's a little bit like having a slide pressed against the string.
Afterwards published in Nimes as a pamphlet, that the publisher had seen, among other documents found in the Bastille, a card bearing the unintelligible number 6438900, and the following note: Fouquet, arriving from the Maison Sainte Marguerite in an iron mask. To this there was.
So that's kind of a, and once you go all the way to preparation force 1, then it's basically equivalent to moving the pitch knob around on the first page, because you're shortening or lengthening the string. You're not letting it vibrate past that point. It's got another control on the second page here on P1 where called let ring. So what does that mean? It doesn't really matter unless you have MIDI mode on, but let me play around with it a little bit.
A double signature vis-a-vis
So
XX, superimposed on.
you'll notice that doesn't really do anything. It's like the decay time is determining how long they ring, and we set that on the first page. So this really doesn't do anything unless you have it set to have MIDI controlling the pitch instead of that first knob. So if I push the A button, now MIDI is, so it changes between knob pitch and MIDI pitch. So now that first knob doesn't matter. It's the one that was trying to set the frequency, and instead this keyboard is what's setting it. Yeah, apparently that does nothing. Oh, I see what's wrong. My MIDI keyboard isn't plugged in. Let's try again. So now the reason it was working with let ring up is because it wasn't getting any notes from the keyboard. And the idea behind let ring is it's kind of a laissez vibre, kind of like it means sort of there's no damping on the strings and they'll just vibrate. And they had not received any MIDI notes, so when I turned them into MIDI mode, they just defaulted to like a really, really low note, all of them. But now that I've got the keyboard coming in, if I hold some notes, it sets... I'm holding down 3 notes and it's setting 3 strings to be those notes. And the other 3 strings, since let ring is down, the ones that aren't being controlled are muted. So I can move around and... convinced himself that the prisoner was a woman. As we see discussion through the light on the subject, instead of being dissipated, the confusion became ever worse confounded. In 1790, they met one of the shop where she appeared. He had left his notebooks, his library, and his correspondence to Livy. The memoirs are undoubtedly authentic. So if I have let ring off and I lift up my hand, it damps all the strings. If I turn let ring back up, it'll keep that chord that I was playing, but it'll also be playing the other 2 strings. I was only playing 4 notes, so there were 4 notes assigned to that chord. If I let go and turn up let ring, though, it's going to play those 4 notes I was just playing and the last 2 notes that I was playing before that the other strings were set to. Yeah, so now I've got like a B natural and a B flat in there because I was playing a G major before I switched it to G minor. And I can reset them by just playing 6 notes instead of 4. Yeah. Then there's another option, which is you can have it be on knob pitch, but then push the B button. So the B button is switching between knob 1 controls all strings, and they're all overtones of it. Here, I'm going to switch back to page 0 so I can use that frequency control. Here. Right, so now all the strings are controlled by that, and they're all overtones of it. But if I hit B, now they're actually all individually controlled by their own knob. So. Several English scholars have cited So basically, as I move this one around, we don't hear it very much because all the other strings are still set to overtones of it. But now I can move to P2 to see the knobs that control frequency 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then let's try listening to a little sound there. We now come to the Protestant extracts from the memoirs that were shot to on the delayed tape, there was a time when every class in society was asking who the famous personage was who went by the name of the Iron Mask. But I always spent this curiosity being something so that was a private message of the same cause. No guarantee you know that there's anything to kill you, should you let it. So with that, you can really kind of accurately control what the different strings are. Unfortunately, right now, there's no real way to mute the strings you don't want to hear while you're trying to tune them. So maybe I'll try to figure out a feature that lets you do that so that you can tune the strings one at a time and then be able to hear them individually while you're tuning them. Be a little more useful. I'm not sure. I'd like a little more feedback on whether that individual string tuning mode is useful or not. Yeah. And then, do I have anything on C? Yeah. So the C button switches from decay mode to feedback mode. Decay mode, FB mode. So what does that mean? Basically, if you're in decay mode, then the decay time of the string is set by this knob. If you're in feedback mode, it'll actually it'll just force the string to feedback, so it'll not ever die away. This is kind of interesting. You can get some really nice sounds with this, especially with using the preparation pick position stuff. So let's take them just kind of resonating where they are. Turn on feedback. So this is kind of like I've got an E-bow on a virtual string, and I'm just moving around a finger that is lightly touching the string to get different harmonics, to force the E-bow to kind of bring out the different harmonics. It'll ring a little more readily if I turn my preparation force down a little. Maybe we'll be able to hear the harmonics a little clearer too if I switch it to single knob controlling all of them. There we go. Now I'm going to add in some of the input signal, that voice again.
1638 at 8:30 o'clock in the evening, while the king was at supper. His brother, whose name was Alice, was at dinner. But whereas his birth was slowly public, things was sad and secret. For the king, being informed by the midwife that the queen was about to give birth to a second child, ordered the chancellor, the midwife, the chief almoner, the queen's confessor, and myself to stay in her room to be witnesses of whatever happened.
So this is pretty interesting. I find this to be a relatively unusual effect. I don't really know of anything else, any other like pedal that does this. But it's really beautiful. It works really well in a lot of different contexts.
So that it was said in Paris that it would be the greatest misfortune which could happen to the state. The Archbishop of Paris summoned the soothsayer and ordered there to be imprisoned in the same bazaar, because the populace was becoming excited about them. A circumstance which filled the king with care, as he foresaw much trouble to his kingdom. He looked into the soothsayers' character, whether they had really been born by the constellations, or whether Providence or His Majesty had been born with the calamities which would have influenced.
It reminds me a little bit of
The king had sent a messenger to the cardinal to tell him of his prophecy, and the cardinal had replied that the matter must be considered.
the sound of Nick Collins has an album called what is it called? Sound for Picture, I think. Sound Without Picture. I'm not sure, but it's a really beautiful album where it's all kind of manipulations of the voice, and a couple of the pieces he uses his backwards guitar where it's like a bunch of pickups wired to drive the strings instead of pick up the signal, and then he drives his vocal signal into the strings, makes them sympathetically resonate, and it ends up sounding basically like this. So kind of happy that this model works and produces a really realistic sound that way. Yeah, so that's about that one.